right. Welcome, everybody, to the Next Level Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Ant-Man Z, joined by my right-hand man, Andrew Crash Nash. Crash, peep this for me.
What's up?
You hear that?
What is it, Ant?
That's right. We're here to bring you the good, the bad, and the ugly from Wild Card Weekend. Now, before we get started, if you found this channel, we'd really appreciate it if you'd follow, like, subscribe, and all that stuff that helps the YouTube algorithm. In this episode, we're going to look what happened at Baltimore, Maryland over the weekend with the wild card matchup between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. Crash, you know the Pittsburgh Steelers are my team. We are not happy in Yinzerland.
Right.
Losing five in a row.
You expected it, though, didn't you?
Yeah, coming into the playoff game on a 4-game skid is never a good way to enter a playoff contention. I know that everything resets when the playoffs start because it becomes a 1-game elimination. But when you come in and you just seem completely out of sync, which you have to be completely out of sync to drop 4 games in a row in the NFL, how did they expect to get that back? Was that even possible that they could just somehow muster up a good game after looking so poorly in the last month of the season?
Yeah, it's kind of like the domino effect, isn't it? Once one fall or the house of cards, once they just keep falling, on you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That's definitely what happened there. One thing after another. And, if we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, I think in this case, we almost have to start with the ugly, unfortunately, because there was nothing good to say about the Pittsburgh Steelers' performance out there, not only on Saturday during the playoff game, but in the month leading up to it. It was like you said, a domino effect of bad thing after bad thing after bad thing. And Crash, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
that starts at the top, doesn't it?
Always, bro. So ownership to coaching staff, everyone is involved. There's no one exempt.
Yeah. So here's Mike Tomlin, right? He's never had a losing season. That's unbelievable for an NFL coach, by the way, right? Like, let's knock that off the top. That is absolutely unheard of that an NFL head coach has never had a losing season. And we're not talking about a second-year guy. We're talking about a guy that's going to be entering his 19th season next year. So he's Hall of Fame right off the bat, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, his track record and his resume speaks for itself. Come on, man. Seriously, yeah.
Yeah. Now, that being said, though, he's got 8 years without a playoff win in Pittsburgh. That is the longest drought they've had since the Super Bowl era. That's the longest drought of a playoff win for the Pittsburgh Steelers. 8 years without a playoff win. Their last 6 appearances, they've lost.
Yeah, I've wore many faces in semi-professional football. Part owner, front office. One of my best friends I consider him a best friend. He's ex-owner of a team, so I was in front office for a while. So I wore many faces, not just coaching, also in the front office. So I'm asking you, Ant. I know the Texans. We just got off covering them. What a phenomenal job they did. They finally did the right thing, I think, because the fans were tired of it. You were losing fan base. Let's face it. And they made some really tough decisions, but they were the right ones. And they started up with the top GM, and then they hired Ryans and so on. So since you know Pittsburgh so much, is it some maybe ownership behind the scenes that Tomlin can't talk about? I don't know, Ant. What do you think?
Well, here's the deal with that, right? Like, the Pittsburgh Steelers have been owned by the Rooneys since the 1930s. It was Art Sr. We had Joe Mixon in the last episode smoking his cigar. The Chief, as he was known, Art Rooney Sr., was always known to be smoking a cigar. He is such a Pittsburgh fan, and the Rooneys themselves are such Pittsburgh fans. I want to tell you a little story that happened in the 1970s. Art Rooney Sr., who, God rest his soul, was approached by the NFL commissioner. I want to say it was I'm going to get it wrong. So, but whoever the NFL commissioner was at the time during the early 70s, he came to Art Rooney and said, "Hey, we're doing an ad campaign. We want the Pittsburgh Steelers to be the face of the NFL. We want the Pittsburgh Steelers to be America's team." And Art Rooney Sr. told him, "We're not America's team. We're the Pittsburgh Steelers." And you know what? That's something that resonates with people from Western Pennsylvania. We like that. We like a dedication to our city and our team and our way of doing life up there. You know, it's a blue collar town, Crash. Everybody up there is hardworking. There's not a lot of affluent people. Of course, there are some, but most everybody up there is a hardworking, blue collar, get down in the dirt if you have to and do what's necessary to win, to be winners.
And because you're from the Steel City, right?
I absolutely am.
Yeah, let me hear some. Well, keep on. I want to hear this.
So, you know, during the 1970s, they became the first real dynasty, I think, of the NFL, you know, winning 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. That was absolutely unheard of. And
now, are we talking about the Steel Curtain, Terry Bradshaw, Lynn Swann?
Yeah, you got it. All those guys.
Stallworth.
Mean Joe Green.
Mean Joe Green, the Steel Curtain.
Yeah, that's exactly what they were.
It's my era, bro. Come on.
Head coach Chuck Noll. Now, you know what? I'm going to take that thought right there. Follow me on this, Crash. So when they hired Chuck Noll, and I believe it was 1969, they were the losingest franchise in NFL history.
Interesting.
Chuck Noll, of course, turned that around. They win 4 Super Bowls in a decade and become the greatest team of the 1970s. That's that team with your Terry Bradshaw, your Mean Joes, your Lynn Swann, Franco Harris, rest his soul.
Mel Blount,
yeah. Rocky Bleier. You got some names in there. These were hardworking guys. But my point is this. Chuck Noll was the coach of that team until 1985 season. I might be off by a year there, but it was in the early to mid 80s.
No teeth linebacker Jack.
Jack Lambert. You remember them, bro. Yeah, these guys are the best. But you know what? It was Chuck Noll. It was Bill Cowher. And now it's been Mike Tomlin. Do you know that the Pittsburgh Steelers, in those, 6 decades? 3 coaches, Crash. 3 coaches in 6 decades. The Chicago Bears have had 3 coaches in the last 5 years. You know, this is a different environment that's there in Pittsburgh. And loyalty is at the core of it, Crash. I say all that to say that the Rooneys, they have a loyalty to Mike Tomlin that might be a little unhealthy.
Almost like the mob mentality or something. I mean, it's like, hey, you go, we're loyal, man, all the way.
Now, here's the thing, though, right, Crash? I think that they're, you know, if you're Art Sr. or Art Jr., by the way, this is who's now the owner. This is Art Sr.'s son. So he's the owner of the organization. And, you know, he has this mentality that they want to do football the way that they've always done football. They want to be hard-nosed, blue-collar.
Who's they?
The Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, remember what Art Rooney Sr. said. We're not America's team. We're the Pittsburgh Steelers. And when
the franchise. What you're saying is that they have an identity.
Yes. You
not
got
just the team, but the logo.
You got it. Crash, you're right on there. And let me tell you right now, that is what they're dealing with. This is the double-edged sword. It is both a blessing and a curse. So let me give you an example. Mike Tomlin wants to continue that Steeler tradition, which is when we say hard-nosed, what we're talking about is have a tough defense and have a good run game. Win the trenches. That's what we're talking about. Now, let me give you 2 facts here that stand out as to why I consider this my ugly portion of what's going on here. The Pittsburgh Steelers have the #1 paid defense in the NFL. In other words, their defenders make more money as a whole than any other team. So they should be relatively good at defense. Wow. And you got some big names out there. You got future Hall of Famer Cameron Hayward. You got a guy who's an absolute monster, TJ Watt. You got Alex Highsmith on the other end. You have Minkah Fitzpatrick as a safety. They've got that new guy, Peyton Wilson, as their middle linebacker, who just really took over this year, that spot that they've been struggling to fill. But you know what? Here's the problem, Crash. They gave up 300 yards on the ground to the Baltimore Ravens this past Saturday. I don't care how much your defense is paid. If they're getting gashed for 300 yards on the ground, you got a problem.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
And then the flip side to that is this. Because you have your identity. Remember, you said that. The identity of the Pittsburgh Steelers is we're going to run the football. We're going to wear you down and run that football on you. In true form, the Steelers were 4th in the NFL in rushing attempts. 4th in the NFL. There's only 3 teams that ran the ball more than the Pittsburgh Steelers. So they stayed true to form with their identity.
Since we're talking, okay,
wait, here's the problem though, Crash. There's a big problem with that. It's not just that they ran the ball 4 times. Let me tell you what the problem is. The problem is you weren't in the top 5 in rushing yards. You weren't in the top 10 either. Crash, you're not even in the top 20. They were 26th. 26th in the league. That means there's only 6 other teams that ran the ball less yardage than the Pittsburgh Steelers. So they have more attempts than just about anybody else and less yards than just about anybody else. Crash, it wasn't working. You might have an identity. You might have an idea of where your team wants to go, but either your personnel is unable to pull it off or your schematics are not able to get it done with the people you have. Now, you being a former coach, and actually you're still plugged into coaching now, but give us that coach's mindset. If you have this desire to have this identity for your team and it's just not working, what do you do?
Well, I've seen it. And it's immaturity. First of all, it's because, in life, there's a term that's insanity. Actually, the definition is doing the same things over and over and expecting different results. It also says that there could be some false pride in there and arrogance because you're not willing to learn. Whenever I believe that I have all the answers in life, that's anything. That's parallel. That's universal. I stopped growing as a person, a human being. It's the same thing as a coach. They can get stuck. They can do it. I've seen it.
Yeah.
And it costs everybody around them, the organization. So really, you're losing. And it's kind of like being stagnant. I talked about being stagnant this morning, about stagnant, still water. It becomes still, stinky. That's why you get water that's flowing. You can drink it out of a spring. You become stagnant and you don't remain teachable. And it can happen to all of us. You think that I'm gonna hammer this nail as many times as I can, or it needs to be. But even though it won't go anywhere because I'm nailing in concrete,
right?
It's not gonna happen.
No,
it's gonna bend.
And you know what, Crash? I don't think there's a Pittsburgh Steeler fan out there that doesn't agree with you. I'm actually surprised that when I didn't turn on KDKA News, that's one of their local broadcasts there in Pittsburgh, that they didn't have people out in front of Acrisure Stadium, formerly known as Heinz Field, with their pitchforks and torches ready to take on Mike Tomlin and oust him from the building themselves. But Art Rooney Jr. came out and made sure to put to rest all of the little rumors floating around when yesterday he said that Mike Tomlin his job is not in jeopardy.
Ooh.
Yeah. But Crash, I agree with you. As a Steeler fan myself, and I know that other fans are going to 100% agree with what you're saying, it's stagnant. And there's no way that Art Jr. doesn't see that. He knows that something needs done.
Here's one for you. Ready? Life around us is changing. The world's a lot different than it was 30 years ago. It's the same way with football. Back in the days, you could ground and pound. Back in the days, it because of also the rule changes, right? Yeah. It's all about high flying, powered offenses, right?
Yeah.
And you got to here's my philosophy. Ready for this? Every coaches out there, take some of this to heed. Take some old school principles in your coaching philosophy, lay down that foundation, but you got to be willing to change. You got to be taking on some new, because it's a new era, baby. And if you stay stuck in that mindset, you're never going to win.
Yep. And you know what? The problem is, Crash, is that for decades, football has been built around programs, right? Like when you think of programs, think of college football. You think of Alabama, for example. You think of Nick Saban, and it was his program. You bring people in, they conform to your program, you recruit the people for your program, and it works, and you keep churning it out. But I'm with you, Crash. I think we've turned a page where you end up with a lot of people. For example, Mike Tomlin, he has a program, and his program is, I want to run the football and I want to be good defensively. But the product that we're seeing on the field is not reflecting that program at all. Now, in my mind, I think what needs to happen is that you need to work with the pieces that you have and bring out the best in them. If I'm given, for example, 5 data scientists who are so great at crunching numbers, some really book smart guys, I don't want them with shovels in their hand digging trenches. That's not going to be their forte. And if I got 5 guys that are just, bruisers who are hardworking guys, I don't need them in there solving algorithms for me. I don't think that you're utilizing your talent properly when you try to do that.
Hey, brother, in waxing, there's weight classes, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
For a reason. Well, okay, I'm just giving another philosophy scenario. Check this out. So I wanted to use that for a reason. I don't know why that came from. So you mean to tell me in football, because these guys are graded, there's a grade that they're given. So you're telling me that, first of all, you bring in a veteran quarterback that you believe and you trust. He's shown in these practices and these tryouts that he still got it, right?
Yeah.
So then you put him in a situation or your scheme, your mindset, and then he fails. And then you go, see? No. Like you just said, I take what I've got. Maybe a guy isn't like a receiver. He runs a 4.2, 4.3, 40. Okay? So I'm going to put him what he does best, not what he doesn't do. I just talked about that the other day, sealing off the edge, right? If you want to run those jet sweeps, you better have a tight end at the end if you're going to plug one in, or a right tackle, probably another, that knows how to seal the edge.
Yep.
Or don't run it.
Yeah, you got to make your adjustments. One word comes to my mind here, Crash. Just one word.
Yeah.
Stubborn. The word is stubborn. And I'll tell you right now, Mike Tomlin is a first ballot Hall of Fame coach. The moment he retires and he's done with the game, he'll be in the Hall of Fame. If the Pittsburgh Steelers fired him today by 5 p.m. tonight, he'll have a new job. That's a guarantee. He's that good of a coach. That being said, he's one of the most stubborn human beings I've ever seen. And I think that they've just reached a critical juncture where either he needs to change some of his philosophies, or the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to continue to fall. They're going to continue to have these 10-3 openings, these epic collapses of 5 in a row on their way out, and be eliminated in the first game.
Or I can see I can see what would happen. All right, you ready for the image I'm seeing?
Yeah.
Is the very first preseason game, all Steeler fans have bags over their head and wanting him out of there.
Yeah, you ain't kidding.
Or somebody.
So we agree that's the ugly in this game. It's just that whole situation with a vision, like you said, a team ideal. You have this ideal that you want to run, but the product that you have on the field is incapable of pulling it off. You're going to end up with blowouts like we had.
Yeah, man, I believe that's in life. I believe that's in football.
Yeah.
No one's exempt from that, Ant.
Yep.
And listen, I'm not trying to get somebody fired, okay? Not by any means. But listen,
I don't know if we can get Tomlin fired.
Well, yeah, we don't have that power. But I'm just saying.
I don't know if anybody does.
What I'm saying is that listen, you got to conform. Marine Corps talks all about it, military. You got to improvise.
Yeah.
No one's exempt from that. That rule applies to everything and everybody in life. God made it that way.
And you know what? We're going to touch on this as we go further on, not in this one, but in the next one. We've talked about that, especially when we talked about the Texans Chargers game. Where's the adjustments? Where's somebody that's able to say, hey, this isn't working. Let me do this instead. I don't think we've seen that so far in this wild card weekend.
Too many Chiefs and not enough Indians, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You do end up with that. All right, so that was the ugly. Now let's talk about the bad. That Pittsburgh Steelers defense was just bad. They got absolutely gouged. The first, I want to say, 2 drives of the Baltimore Ravens were 90% runs by Lamar Jackson, as he just methodically ran outside the tackle boxes, and he was content with picking up 5, picking up 8, picking up 11, and it just made the middle of that defense soft. And then what happened, Crash? It made room for one of your guys to go in there and just wreak havoc. What happened?
Yeah. Well, here it is. Well, a lot of things. Here, ready? I was seeing a lot of arm tackles. First of all, the energy, we didn't see effort and energy right out the gate. We saw it in all these games. We saw the winning teams that came out of the gate and they got these big leads. Why? Because the energy, the effort, the want to, the drive, the gotta have it, all that was there coming right in the game out the gate. And it's almost like you have to wonder, is all the noise that's going on in Pittsburgh twinkling down? Because listen, like the front office when I worked it, you don't know what me and the owner talked about. We know. You don't. We don't know what's going on in that locker room or behind the scenes. Could that have played?
Well, let me ask you this, Crash. Let's just throw another stat back into the ugly category that we didn't touch on before. In those last 6 losses by the Pittsburgh Steelers being eliminated in the first round, 63-0 combined first quarter scores. They've been outscored 63-0 in their last 5 games.
You can't do it. I have a flaw. I have, like I believe I have a blueprint to winning. And that is this. I'm going to give it away today. Here you go. So my philosophy is this: always receive the kick. Why? Well, as long as I have the ball in my hand, I have a better chance to win the game, right? So I want the ball first, go down and drive. I want to get up on top first, right? Because why? Now the momentum that you talk about is in, the crowd's in it or out of it, where we got the lead. And if you build enough lead, now your defense can pin its ears back and go after the quarterback and the offense of the other team. They got to pass. They got to.
Yep. Steelers have come out historically slow. They've been blown out in the first quarter of all these playoff games in round 1 of the wild cards. They actually did, for the first time, throw the ball on first down. It was a nice stretch play, which moved everyone down the field, left Pat Freiermuth, their big tight end, underneath for about an 8-yard pickup. The ball hit him right in his hands. He dropped it. That was the first play of the game.
That's also a good point all the way across the board. And I saw a lot of drops. What's going on with these receivers, man? Yeah. All the drops that's going on. You had said something, mentioned that before, and I was like, drop. And these are balls you and I could make.
It's like you said, if you're not coming out hot, if you're not coming out with that emotion, if you're not coming out fired up, what are you even doing there? And that's been one of the Pittsburgh Steelers' problems. Again, that falls back into the ugly category. If they come back next year, which chances are with Tomlin, they'll end up with a winning record and at least an invitation to the playoffs. They've got to be able to come out and play the first quarter of football with another team to be able to stay in it. You can't just try to make your comeback at the end.
It's too hard. It's just like I have friends over here on my channel page that are professional fighters. I have that experience as well. It's fine. It's like getting hit. Boom. I mean, if you've never been in a fight before, it's hard, man. You get shell shocked. Yeah. It's hard to recover and come back. And even in boxing, you get down on points. What they say in the corner, you got to go knock them out now.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with football. You get too far behind, it's hard to climb back up, man.
It sure is. And this is where the game got bad. To jump back into our bad real quick, once Lamar Jackson was done surgically dissecting their defense to set them up for what he wanted, they just started handing the ball to King Henry, who had a field day, literally. He was untackleable because by this point, it's like you said, it was just all arm tackles. They had no energy. They had no effort. They had no answer. There was never an adjustment. Crash. Speaking of Crash, that's what they had. They had Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt crashing in on the quarterback to attack the running back, and Lamar Jackson RPO'd them to death. And once they got cold feet, then they started handing the ball off to King Henry. So
it was actually an awesome, excellent game plan coming in by Coach Harbaugh, the other one.
Oh, absolutely.
So what he did
now you're into the good, aren't you? You're into the good.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
That's good. Let's move on.
So what he did was, it was brilliant. So instead of first, what most teams would do, what would you do? You would hand it off to your power back. He did the opposite. It's kind of like setting up the pass to run. he went ahead and used Lamar Jackson out the gate. Oh, you think we're going to give it to King Henry? I'm keeping it. And that's
Right.
exactly what it was. Brilliant. And
Yeah.
now you don't know where it's going. Now,
Right.
then once they got tired, they wore him down. Then here comes King Henry.
Yeah, it was an absolutely that is the good of this game, is that if you're a Baltimore Ravens fan and you've just been feasting on my tears for the last 25 minutes, we welcome you. Jim Harbaugh, I think, dialed up one of the best games of his career, because Mike Tomlin's been a little bit of a thorn in his side. They have a very similar play style. They want that ground game. They want that hard defense. They want to be in the backfield. And Harbaugh knew how to take advantage of that Pittsburgh Steeler aggressiveness from the pass rush and just absolutely said, Lamar, you're going to have to go out there and get them guessing so they don't know who's got the football. And if you watch the replays of that, I don't even think I want to, Crash, because there was one point where Lamar fake-handed it off to Derrick Henry, and TJ Watt, who, by the way, didn't end up with a single line on the stat sheet. No tackles.
Amazing.
No forced fumbles, no defended pay, nothing. It was as if he wasn't even in the game. His biggest hit was on Derrick Henry in the backfield, where he actually lit him up. It was a nice hit by TJ. Unfortunately for him, Henry didn't have the ball. The ball was in the hands of Lamar Jackson, who was already about 8 yards downfield.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The game plan was there so really creatively well, and that's what you want, right? You want a defense you want to keep them guessing. You want to keep them off balance, like that fire in the ring, bing, bing, bing. They don't get time to either gather their thoughts. And then whenever they do finally think, okay, we got it. No, you don't. And, let's also say this. I don't think Tomlin was the only one that could be out the door. Harbaugh's might be fighting for his job as well. Because the Ravens, since Big Ray, my favorite player of all time, Ray Lewis, by the way, left, they haven't got over the hump either to get to the big one.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that too. Yeah, it's one of those things that, looking in from an outside perspective, because neither one of us are in Baltimore, we're not in that media environment, but we look at Harbaugh and we say, wow, this is a Hall of Fame coach. He'll get scooped up anywhere in a second if they were to fire him. But I bet they're getting restless over there in Baltimore. Not only they expected to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers here, and they did. But I think what they're looking for is to go all the way. They're looking to get over that hump of the AFC Championship and divisional game. And Lamar Jackson has been known to struggle in those big games. But I think if I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan, I have a lot of confidence right now I think Harbaugh's more in tune with him than ever before. I mean, that game was dialed up brilliantly. I hate to say it as a Steeler fan, but looking at it, you just got to give that one to Harbaugh. That was one of his better coach games.
Any Given Sunday is one of my favorite movies. It almost takes me back to Willie Beam, and he's going, he's saying, do your thing, boy.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. So looking forward to what's coming next weekend, the Baltimore Ravens will be going to Orchard Park to face the Buffalo Bills. Crash, minus anything that happens in that game, win or lose, that might be the best game that we get to see in the AFC side this playoff run. What do you think?
Oh yeah, it's going to be physical because both teams are just that, and they both on both sides of the they came out to play in both their games. It's going to be fantastic football. Get ready, man. It's coming.
Yeah. And it's also going to be the MVP, the two top MVP choices for this year squaring off against each other. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We appreciate you guys coming in with this one. We'll be back later for our next one. Of course, we will also give you guys a preview of that game coming next week in Orchard Park. We appreciate you. God bless you. And we'll see you in the next one.